Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Wicked and Gladiator 2 take the box office by storm, or at least that's what some would have you believe. We'll talk about what the actual numbers for Wicked and for Gladiator 2 were. Obviously, this has now been dubbed Glicked. This is not nearly as much of a natural phenomenon as Barbenheimer was. That was something that came from the masses, whereas this one is trying to basically come and be pushed on people through the social media platforms, through the giant corporations pushing these things. And as we all know, whenever they have the AstroTurf, whenever they have the fake memes that they're trying to create themselves, it usually doesn't work out all that well. However, we could definitely say that when it comes at least to the film Wicked, it is in a pretty good spot as of right now, whereas Gladiator 2, though it is definitely not as bad as it could be because of a much stronger international showing than domestic, things are not all sunshine and rainbows for that movie either. We'll talk about that. Also talk about the second weekend numbers for Red 1 and also the new film Bonhoeffer from Angel Studios. Still have to watch that movie. Just got sent a recent updated version of the screener copy for the movie, and so I plan to watch that and give my thoughts over on Criticlist. Maybe be able to create a video, but definitely have my review up over there. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. The number one film of this weekend, to no one's surprise, is Wicked. This is a film that is projected to make quite a bit of money domestically. This is a movie that could easily get to $300+ million just domestically. International, I could see this film also doing pretty well. What people seem to realize or fail to realize when it comes to Wicked is that it is not just an American brand. It is not just an American story. It is something that actually goes far beyond that. It is something that has crossed many different countries, the boundaries of many different countries, and has been imported in through various countries and various languages as well. This is a show that has been adapted to various cultures and has had several different leads of all varying backgrounds. And that's one of the things that this can absolutely do, is that it is not beholden to any type of, any type of race or any type of nationality. It is something that, because of the fact one of the characters is green, can be played almost by anybody. And that's why I think this movie is doing pretty well in addition to that, because even on Broadway, there were people of color who were obviously able to play Elphaba and did so very well. It seems like when it comes to this case, despite the fact that this actress who has portrayed Elphaba in this movie has said some pretty silly things and doesn't really present herself, I think, in the best way possible, especially to maybe a little bit more hesitant fans, or at least hesitant moviegoers, there's no denying the facts that the film has done down. Now, again, what has to be said here, though, okay? Something that has to be cleared up. This movie, right now, as of right now, has been projected to make $114 million domestic in its opening weekend. Now, there's a couple of things that's true here. One, the traditional domestic box office, the tracking for that, the traditional had the film at around $100 million plus. Right, that was the early estimates going in. Once they adapted the numbers because of the Thursday-Friday numbers, that actually got adjusted up quite a bit into about the $120 million range. Going even back to what the weekend forecast was like, going over to Box Office Theory, it had the numbers here, right, about how the movie was expected to make around $100 million, again, according to traditional standards, but then $120 to $155 million based on the Box Office Theory. So the fact is, for both Wicked and even for Gladiator 2, right, the range for that one for the traditional was $60 million, whereas for Box Office Theories, it was 59 to 68. In every single situation, those numbers are wrong, right? Traditional definitely underestimated the movie in its initial estimates, but then when it readjusted after those Thursday-Friday numbers, it also, in a way, over-adjusted. So it's interesting that right now the projections, at least for the Sunday numbers, and so Saturday and Sunday together, is that the movie didn't do as well as many had thought it was going to do. Now, this does not mean that the movie is not a success. This does not mean that the film cannot possibly make things up this week, and especially going into the holiday frame, because one could easily argue that, hey, a lot of people are waiting to hear, one, what the initial thoughts are on the movie, and two, they're waiting for the holiday frame to start, right? A lot of people will be off from school either the entirety of this week or at least for the second half of this week, and that is something that has to be taken into account. You have a new film, Moana, coming out on Wednesday, obviously in anticipation of the Thanksgiving holiday. So I don't think that this is going to be bad news either for Wicked or Moana 2, or really for the theaters, who are going to be the ultimate winners of this story. And so I did want to point out here that the numbers definitely came in underneath what was projected. I thought this film, based off of the tracking and based off of the projections going into it, were going to be closer to $150 million. turns out that's not the case. It came in actually quite a bit underneath that. Again, underneath the box office theory numbers by quite a bit, and also below what the readjusted numbers were for the likes even of the traditional box office tracking community. And so, yeah, that has to be said here, but still $114 million domestic opening for a musical in 2024 is still very, very strong. Just not as strong as what many of us suspected that it would be able to do. Gladiator 2 also came in underneath those projections, right? 55 million means it, again, underestimated or went underneath even the projections from the traditional media and from box office theories by a bit. So $55 million domestic opening there. This movie is also just not that good. This is a very long in the tooth movie that is boring. There's no reason to care about any of the characters that have been put on screen. This movie put me to sleep quite easily. And every time I was awake, and especially towards the last third of the movie that I was completely awake for, I kept checking my watch saying, when's this movie going to end? Because I honestly, I almost walked out. I've never walked out, at least in the last several years, from as far as my memory back can go, I've never walked out of a movie before. I almost walked out of this movie. That's how bad I thought the film actually was, just from a narrative standpoint. And just because, again, why would I waste time on characters that I don't care about? If you don't have good characters, then or a good story to boot, there's no reason to stick around. So I don't think that Gladiator 2 is going to be doing nearly as well domestically. I think that this film will probably end up flopping quite a bit in the domestic market. The real question is going to be, will the Thanksgiving holiday have any help for this movie? Also, will those internationals be high enough to save it? As of right now, it's still got a very long way to go, especially with the budget for this movie being fluctuating, initially being reported at 210, recently being updated to 230. There's some that speculate it could be upwards of $250 million or more before marketing costs are put into it. So this movie has to make a lot of money to break even. And as of right now, if you're making a huge portion international, that is not the place to go. And so this domestic number should definitely be concerning for them. It might be higher than what they had thought their numbers were going to be, but the fact that even the traditional box office community had this number a lot higher and it did not hit that number should be a little bit of a concern for Paramount and for everyone involved with the movie. When it comes to Red 1, it's a pretty clear case here that this movie is a flop. $13.2 million, a 59%, so roughly 60% drop in the second weekend of its release. Some people are trying to argue, well, it was going to be made for streaming anyway, and so this is just extra. All that means is that you still spent the same amount of money that you did on this movie, and now you've added even more money to it because you marketed the movie, right? You have to spend more on marketing to get it out in theaters, and then you have to also take into account how it's distributed, the cuts with the theaters. So really, it's just a loss leader in many ways, and I don't think you're going to have enough views on Amazon Prime, at least, to justify the film's existence. That's just, again, based on the numbers right now. So a massive flop in Red 1. Can't say I'm that surprised. From Angel Studios, we got Bonhoeffer, which has now been retitled Bonhoeffer Pastor Spy Assassin. At least that's the first I've seen that name. I don't know how long that's been around. Maybe it's been around for a long time, but $5.1 million in its opening weekend. So around $2,600 per screen. Again, not anything earth-shattering there. For Angel Studios, I think that we are definitely going to have to admit that we're not going to see anytime soon anything close to the numbers of Sound of Freedom. That movie was just able to, again, really capture the zeitgeist, really able to expose a lot of things that people just weren't as aware of or didn't want to admit to. And I think that just, again, the message of that movie is what drove it to be what it actually was. And I've heard good things about Bonhoeffer. I hear it's a really good film telling a really good story that needs to be told about someone who was trying to stand up for, right, those that were being persecuted during World War II. So, again, Bonhoeffer could potentially have some legs as far as Angel Studios type of legs are concerned, but $5.1 million, it's about what we typically see for the Angel Studios releases these days. Venom coming in the number 5 spot. Venom: The Last Dance dropping 45%. And then rounding out the top 10, Best Christmas Pageant Ever, 33% drop there. Heretic, 55% drop for Heretic, so still going, again, moving forward there. Wild Robot adding to its overall profits, losing another 700 screens. So Heretic, it looks like, is probably nearing the end of its, of the vast majority of its money here. It'd be interesting to see how many theaters sticks around during the holiday frame with Thanksgiving. Same also with the Wild Robot. A lot of people might be interested to go to see that. Definitely seems, though, that films like Wicked are going to be probably pushing more people. Wicked and Moana 2, especially Moana 2, getting more of that family demographic that the Wild Robot was still hanging on to in many ways. Still making, over $1 million in a weekend, though, after 9 weeks of release. Still impressive, adding on to its overall profits. Smile 2 dropping 62%. Again, this film leaving the vast majority of the theaters that it had left. And then rounding off the top 10 is the Searchlight independent film, A Real Pain. This is Jesse Eisenberg's directorial debut. $1.1 million. The guys over Film Threat spoke pretty highly of it. Obviously very limited in its showing, but also not the biggest numbers in the world for that movie. Let's go into some of the international worldwide numbers here. So first off, for Wicked, $164 million. Now, some might say, ooh, okay, that's quite a bit smaller international. Well, again, keep in mind, this movie is definitely getting a bit of a trickle release in different places. Right now, it is the 24th of November. It has not been released in Argentina, in Austria, in Bulgaria, China. So it is getting a Chinese Communist Party release. Colombia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, again, could be some money there. There is, I believe, a French version of this show. Again, this is been a show been around for 20-ish years, and so it's been across the world in many different places. It's already released in Italy, Japan. There's a Japanese version of this, and one of the alphabets is actually, I believe, from Japan, who is known as being one of people's favorites as far as some of the songs are concerned. So again, this is a worldwide property, and so do not be surprised if it ends up making a lot of money. $4 million right now from Mexico, $4.7 million were reported by South Korea, and then United Kingdom, $17.6 million. And again, don't be surprised by this number, and don't be surprised if this number climbs, because it has been in the West End, right, in the United Kingdom for many, many years as well, about as long as the Broadway run, in fact, if not maybe even longer, right, because typically films go West End, then Broadway. Sometimes they go a little bit of a different path there, but yeah, this movie is going to make a lot of money, a lot more money internationally than people might think. It's not going to be the biggest international release in the world, but it's definitely going to make more than people suspect. I think domestic still going to be probably the strongest, but yeah, don't sleep on that. It's still got a lot of places to open in, and I think it's going to do better than what people might actually expect. I think that this movie still, again, if you use the typical math on a movie like this, you usually make about a third of your entire box office in your opening weekend, looking just at the worldwide numbers, and so that would insinuate that this movie is going to be able to get upwards of, $400-500 million worldwide. I think it'll do much better than that. The real question is going to be how it performs over the holiday frame. Again, that's where this is a bit unique, because this is coming out the weekend before a holiday, and so you might have a lot more people who are like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to hold off on seeing this until the holiday. Because keep in mind, a lot of people going to see this have already seen the play. They already know the story. And so they're not in a mad rush to go and see it, because they already know what the twists are. They already know where the story goes, and in general, from what I've heard, there's not a whole lot of changes going on in this movie compared to the show, or compared, to the book. Obviously, the show is a lot different than the book, but again, this is much more again an adaptation of the actual musical itself. So do not be surprised if they see this number climb a bit more. The daily numbers this week doing better than what most films might do. We'll see what the Sunday to Monday drop off looks like, but yeah, Wicked I think is not done yet. We'll see those week 2 numbers, and I think the holiday frame is going to definitely boost these numbers quite a bit, and we'll have a better assessment of those numbers by the end of next weekend. Same also with Gladiator 2. Still a little bit too early to tell, but what I can say is that it's making way too much money internationally and not nearly enough money domestically to make money back. Again, this movie costs quite a bit of money, and it's also not that good of a film, and I don't think it's going to get a huge number of recommendations from a lot of people. I think that domestic number kind of also showcases that quite a bit. But again, the holiday frame, who knows? Maybe this is going to be that more adult type movie, that the more male dominant audience going to see this film. But even the male audience, right? Even when it comes to the more masculine audience and what the films they go to see, just because there is a guy and fighting and stuff like that does not mean that all guys are then just going to go see it. They also want to see good movies and don't necessarily want to waste 2.5 hours of their time. And I would say don't. It is not worth that time. Red One, speaking of films that aren't worth your time, at least from everything I've heard of Red One, this film's just not making much of anything. Can't say I'm that surprised. Bonhoeffer, $5.1 million. And Venom Last Dance, still in the discussion here, $456 million worldwide as of the recording of this video. Going over the charts because we left Chauncey on OMB Reviews, and right now my chart, unfortunately, is broken. I don't know what's going on with the numbers, but these numbers are not loading. I had to manually enter in these 3 new films just to give us a better idea. But before we get into those movies, let's go ahead and look at the projections for Red One. So now that we have 2 weeks in, $117 million after 2 weeks means this film projected based off of, again, historical data, where most films end up after 2 weeks. The film will end somewhere between $167 and $234 million by the end of its run. So an average around $200 million. Because the film cost $250 million, that means the film's going to have a net loss of between $234 and $274 million. So quite a range there, but this movie definitely going to be a massive, catastrophic failure. So again, $250 million plus is what this film is likely going to leave at, and I believe that would mean this movie is set to be the biggest flop of the year, as even Joker 2 was not projected to have that much of a loss. Now, Joker 2 did a lot worse than even what initial projections were like, but still, the fact remains this is going to be the biggest flop, one of the biggest flops of the year. Again, there were some earlier films from this year that also did not do well and also cost quite a bit of money, but yeah, Red One. can't say I'm that surprised. Let's go to some of the releases here. So first with Gladiator 2, $55.5 million domestic, $162 million international. Remember, you get about 40% cut if you are a studio. So at around $221 million worldwide as of this point. That means we're looking at a loss of around $248 million. Yeah, this movie costs a lot. Again, this is based off of a budget of $230. If this movie costs more than that, and there's some speculation that it did, and again, these numbers might get updated over the course of the next few days or so, then we could expect that number to grow. And so even if this has a huge run international, right now it seems like that is happening, at least in some of the countries that it's in, then you could see this number get whittled down, but not nearly enough, right? You need to have a 1-2 punch of domestic and international, whatever the splits might be. It has to be performing well in both markets. And as of right now, it's really just not doing much when it comes to its domestic overall run at this point. So Gladiator 2, I would say, if the numbers like this continue, if it doesn't get a huge boost, again, that's going to be the question. Does it get a boost from the holiday frame or not? If it does, then okay, might have a different discussion next weekend. If it doesn't, we'll be reiterating the same point that I think personally on this, at this point in time, this movie likely will be a flop and will likely lose money. How much money, though, depends on what it does this week. When it comes to Wicked, very similar story. We have to wait for the weekend numbers, or rather the week numbers, because in general, a film like this with this kind of release, unless it has a very strong hold in both markets, then it would be a film that might barely break even. But I still think this film has a lot of potential to get to $1 billion. And again, this number's coming in a lot lower than what many anticipated, specifically in the domestic marketplace. So we have to wait and see. What does it do on the Monday, Tuesday? What does it actually do on the Wednesday, Thursday when people are actually off from school? How does it hold up on Black Friday? How does it hold up over the weekend, right? That holiday frame. That's going to be the ultimate question, and that's going to determine whether this film is becoming $1 billion film or whether this is the Little Mermaid situation where it only caps out between like $400 and $500 million, and because of its budget, it's not going to make its money back, right? Basically, it's going to be a huge hit or a huge miss, depending on how it does this week. So we'll have to wait and see what those numbers are. Again, this movie cost about $150 million. They spent a lot more money up front for filming both parts. They filmed both parts simultaneously. So part 1, which is Act 1 of the musical, which is based off of, is this movie, and then Act 2, Wicked Part 2, will be next year. And so they, again, all-encompassing price there was probably close to $350 million. So that's the reason why 150 is being reported here. That still means it needs to make around $375 million to break even. So right now, it's on track to make its money back. So right now, it is actually doing okay. It is pacing about what it needs to do. But as I said, this week will tell us a lot. My gut instinct says this film's going to be $1 billion film. I think Moana also might have a very strong Thanksgiving release, and I think that potentially could be another $1 billion film. That's a huge IP, a huge fan base for that film. So don't be surprised to see that film overperform. But right now, Wicked definitely not doing as well as many had anticipated it would be doing this weekend, but it's not doing bad by any stretch. And then lastly, Bonhoeffer, $5.1 million domestic, nothing being reported anywhere else. So based off of its reported budget of around $25 million, it means to make around 62.5 to break even. $5 million, not a great start for that. $34 million currently in the red. So yeah, I honestly would not be surprised to see this film end up being a loss. This is very common for these Angel Studios releases. I think they're able to typically make money back. Obviously, they've got the Angel Guild and they've got a lot of other revenue streams, and I think that will probably end up being a saving grace for this movie. But hey, whenever you have a movie out in the release, you want to make money, and this is, I don't think, exactly the place that they want to be with this. Maybe they're expecting the holiday frame to show up for this movie. Again, we could see all of these films get a boost because of this, right? We're going to have a lot of people. If you are used to going to the theater for Thanksgiving, I would say be ready for a busier than usual. I think, according to Deadline, this was the best pre-Thanksgiving weekend in 11 years. So that's quite a bit, right? We're not just talking about pre-pandemic times, right? We're talking about the box office when it was almost essentially in its heyday, right? As far as, not looking specifically at animated or specifically at even Marvel releases, right? 11 years is a long time for a box office like this for a pre-Thanksgiving weekend. So if that's what it's like for the pre-Thanksgiving, imagine what the Thanksgiving weekend could actually be like. I think that we could potentially see like Wicked just take off. Gladiator 2 maybe gets carried along. I have my suspicions and doubts about that because the film's just not good. Wicked's gotten praise across the board. Wicked's got a lot more going on for it to be able to get that mass appeal, that multiple return visit, right? That's just the kind of movie that it is, again, just because of the fact that it has that musicality to it. And then Bonhoeffer, again, Angel Studios maybe is able to take advantage of that too. We'll have to wait and see. But those are the numbers currently as they stand. So what do y'all thoughts? Do you think that Gladiator 2 is going to end up surprising, is going to make its money back? Again, I think there's way too much money still on the table for that film to be able to come back from it. And Wicked, do you think that this movie is just going to just destroy the next week around, like, having record Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving week, setting those records or matching records, whatever it might be? It has the potential to do that. And what do you think it's ultimately going to do over the holiday frame? I think it's going to take off, but again, we'll have to wait and see. And then Bonhoeffer, have you seen the film? What are your thoughts about it? And do you think that film potentially has some light? Do you think the Christian audience that these films from Angel tend to be geared towards are going to be able to come out during this holiday frame? Let me know your thoughts about that and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, live that fire button, or actually smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Sunday, the last Sunday after Pentecost, Feast of Christ the King for the ordinary calendar. And Christ is always King. And get ready, because Advent starts up next week. Purple Lighting probably coming back here on the channel. You guys are great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.